This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the best all-in-one platform for all of your website building needs. Hey guys, it's Celestia, and I watched that new M. Night Shyamalan movie a couple days ago. I promise I'm building up to something relevant, just bear with me here. It's called Trap, and I gotta say, the premise itself didn't really interest me much. The Netflix summary of it is as follows. At a concert with his daughter, a charming father causes chaos as he sneaks his way past the FBI agents searching the venue for a serial killer. Like, yeah, okay, it seems kind of interesting, but there were at least 10 significantly more interesting options, and it just didn't really stand out. So I scrolled past it the first time and picked one of those instead, and then the second time, and the third time. The fourth time, I finally noticed that M. Night Shyamalan directed it, and immediately put it on without thinking, because, I mean, it's M. Night Shyamalan. His reputation for making iconic thrillers with dramatic twist reveals is world-renowned, and I had never seen one I hadn't liked. Old and The Visit are probably some of my favorite recent movies. Suddenly, my lack of interest in the premise didn't matter, and I was willing to give it a chance without the slightest hesitation. It was okay. Honestly though, I found it pretty underwhelming. It had some compelling scenes and characters, and the writing was good, but the twist was incredibly predictable, and I didn't feel like it managed to maintain enough tension to feel scary or intense or engaging, at least not consistently. I was disappointed, and that got me thinking about what all of that says about art. Yes, we're finally getting to the point. I had just watched a movie I wouldn't have otherwise, just because of the director's reputation and my love for his previous work, only to be disappointed in it, also because of the director's reputation. Because in retrospect, when I thought about it more and took a step back, I realized that I probably would have actually enjoyed the movie if I hadn't known he directed it beforehand. I had extraordinarily high expectations for it because I knew it was an M. Night Shyamalan movie. And even now, when I mentally list the ways it fell short, I'm actively comparing it to his other movies as I do so. All of its shortcomings probably wouldn't have even occurred to me as shortcomings at all had I had normal expectations for it in the first place. And I think I probably would have come out of it thinking, that was pretty good. It speaks to the power of reputation when it comes to the appreciation not just of movies, but all art. We're so much more influenced by the reputations of artists whose work we follow than most of us actively realize. To the point that it made me wonder, is an artist's reputation actually more important than the quality of their work in the first place? I don't just mean popularity. I already discussed how an artist's fame and popularity constantly and demonstrably matters more than their art's quality in a recent video about celebrity artists, and the whole Ed Sheeran controversy. This is more than that. I didn't watch Trap because M. Night Shyamalan is famous. I watched it because of what he's famous for, because of his artistic reputation, not his popularity alone. And I was unable to fully appreciate it on its own merits because I couldn't help but have that reputation influence how I perceived it. And the more I think about it, the more examples I find of that happening in the art community too. So naturally, I had to talk about it because it's interesting and I have no self-control. But before I start rambling about that, because God knows I'll never stop once I start, let me take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace. Because popularity and reputation aren't the only things that can help you succeed at making a career out of art. So can a good portfolio that displays your work accessibly and professionally, and shows clients that you take your craft seriously. And there is no better place to build one than Squarespace, the best website building and hosting platform that I've ever used, and the home to not one but two of my portfolios, both my previous cutesy, super branded one, and my new, revamped, more professional one. It was just as easy to build both of them using all of the tools and templates that Squarespace has to offer, which is saying something given how different they are. But portfolios are really just the beginning. Their extensive library of templates has perfect options for any kind of site you could possibly want to build, and that includes online stores. They give you everything you need to turn any site into one. The ability to manage payments and inventory, handle shipping and fulfillment, and even boost your SEO to help you get more eyes on your site and more customers in turn. It's perfect for selling physical goods like prints and apparel, but they make it just as easy to sell services too, like consultations, event management, editing, and even art commissions, with all of their tools. A streamlined workflow, built-in appointment scheduling, email marketing tools, and so much more. They make it just as easy for your customers to pay too, because they offer all of the most popular payment methods, like Klarna, ACH Direct Debit, Apple Pay, Afterpay, and ClearPay, and even allow you the option to send individualized branded invoices to specific clients, so you can start accepting orders from all around the world with just a few clicks. So whether you're an artist in need of a portfolio, an entrepreneur building an online store, a creator setting up an interactive blog, or a small business owner making a landing page, Squarespace is the place to do it. And you can find out yourself by going to squarespace.com to get your own free trial today. And once you've built the perfect site that you're ready to launch, you can get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain by going to squarespace.com/Duchess linked in the description. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and please go check them out. Now, let's get back to the question at hand. Is an artist's reputation really more important than their actual art? Well, fundamentally, no, at least not in my opinion. What gives art value is what it's expressing and how it's expressing it, not the reputation of the person who made it. I'd argue that their identity does contribute value to it, because who they are as a person inherently influences what and how they express things artistically. But their identity and their reputation are two very different things. artists. And on a purely fundamental level, I don't believe the latter is anywhere near as important as their art itself. Practically and functionally speaking, though, well, that's more complicated. Because if their reputation impedes or at least influences our ability to perceive what the art is expressing and how it's expressing it, or even find any value in either when we otherwise would have, the argument could actually be made that it is more important. Take Colleen, for example. For the longest time after the multiple controversies she was involved in, her style was widely referred to all over social media as the dreaded Colleen art style. And I sincerely do not think that had almost anything to do with what her style actually looked like. It's technically proficient and visually appealing, and I think it's quite pretty, something I know a lot of people agree with, or used to agree with. Sure, for some people, the distaste for it was based on legitimate criticisms. Some consider it to be basic or boring, overdone, too derivative of the popular manhwa style without adding much more of her own to it, and too repetitive in terms of what subjects she draws and what angles and settings she draws them in. That last one is arguably not technically really style related, but that depends on your stance on whether art's subject matter is a stylistic element, I suppose. Regardless, the point is that some people did have genuine problems with it, but for the most part, her style didn't become so ignominious and famously unpopular that it was referred to as dreaded because of how it looked. Her reputation just got so bad that people started associating how it looked with things she had done, so much that they couldn't perceive her art for what it was without thinking about who she was. The things they otherwise would have found visually appealing no longer were, solely because of that, lending credence to the idea that an artist's reputation really is more important than the quality or nature of their work. This is far from the only instance of that either. In others, the reputations of artists are so poor that they poison not only their own styles, but all others that look similar. Look at Puerurica. A while back, I made a video discussing why people so viciously hated the jelly art style, and proposed a few possible explanations. Tons of comments, however, said that none of the reasons that I mentioned bothered them. They hated the jelly art style solely because the artist who popularized it, Puerurica, was, to put it bluntly, kind of an asshole, and was incredibly toxic and gatekeepy about the style, getting unreasonably angry with anyone who quote-unquote copied it, and accusing them of style theft. She was so adamant about gatekeeping the style that not only did her reputation prevent people from appreciating her art, it turned them off of all art done in similar styles, which is a lot because for a while there, the jelly art style was a pretty popular one, and there were a lot of people putting their own spin on it that then faced distaste and pushback based on association alone. It wasn't even their own reputations alienating people from their art, it was someone else's. That's how much of an impact reputation has on appreciation of art. It goes both ways though. Some argue that a positive reputation makes art more appealing than it would be without it. The most controversial, contentious example of this in recent years would be Qinghan, more often known as Qini, or Kini. I don't know which pronunciation is right, it could be neither of those. I did check, I still don't know, I couldn't find conclusive answers. Anyway, she was an incredibly popular, beloved artist who also, unfortunately, happened to be terminally ill. She was fairly open about her experiences with her illness, and while I personally find that commendable and inspirationally admirable, because I have the utmost respect for her and am therefore admittedly biased, a lot of people had differing feelings on the impact that openness had on her reputation. She passed in 2020 after a long and impressively resilient battle with stage 4 cancer, and I've seen quite a few people online, interestingly only anonymously, say that her work has been unfairly praised as amazing because they're biased by sympathy for her situation, and are therefore giving it undeserved praise. She suffered deeply and died far too young, therefore her art is deemed better than it would be if that wasn't the case, as they posit. Personally, I disagree, although I will reiterate my bias in her favor. But I saw her work long before I even knew she was ill, and found it so inspiring that it influenced my early style and subject matter when I more regularly worked traditionally. I think she was genuinely an incredible artist, and I think people would come to that conclusion whether they knew she was ill or had passed or not. But to entertain the opposite argument, I do see where it's coming from. Some people, I'm sure, do glorify her and her art because they sympathize with what she went through, and societally, we do tend to view those who have passed in a higher regard than the living. I'm sure some people who came across her work after her passing do view it more favorably because of that, hence why it's such a contentious issue, because I can see the argument for it without agreeing with it, so I'm sure others can too. But this whole discussion brings Vincent van Gogh to mind. I know it's Van Gogh, but people don't recognize the Dutch pronunciation, and I get called pretentious every single time I use it. His work was deemed mediocre at best when he was alive, and honestly, I understand why. It kind of is, technically speaking at least. But now we know who he was. We know what he went through. We know what his art was expressing. It imbues meaning into it that people living when he was alive wouldn't have thought to consider. But that would only be a bad thing if that meaning wasn't there. And in this case, it's his reputation that actually allows us to see more in his art than we would otherwise, rather than preventing us from doing so. The context gives us insight that lets us see his work through a new lens, one that people viewing it when he was alive didn't have. The same, by the way, just to ramble a little bit more, could be be said of Chini's art. Looking at these pieces on their own, you can find them beautiful, but knowing that she was a terminally ill survivor of 4 open-heart surgeries allows you to view her work in a different light, attributing emotional significance to elements that might otherwise have been viewed as solely aesthetic. That then begs the subsequent question of, should we not all be more open to perceiving possible meaning in art, regardless of our knowledge of the artist, by default? But that's a separate, albeit related, issue. The answer is yes, by the way. Regardless, going back to Van Gogh, it's a double-edged sword. Yes, the context of his reputation allows us insight into his work, but it might also prompt so much sympathy towards that context that our perception is clouded into elevating his work to a higher level than it should be, even with that context in mind. We can say that he was a tortured soul who expressed his pain through his work, and we can perceive it through that lens and extrapolate something new and meaningful. But we can also say that, technically speaking, based on skill alone, he wasn't extraordinary. It was his vision that was so revolutionary, not his objective skill. His reputation does cloud perception of his work favorably, in the same way that Colleen and Puerto Rico's reputations cloud theirs negatively, speaking further to the idea that reputation influences appreciation of art far more than its quality. All of these examples, however, have been addressing personal reputations. Colleen and Puerto Rico did some messed up stuff, and their art styles were viewed as lesser as a result of their unrelated personal reputations. Chini and Van Gogh suffered greatly, both mentally and physically, and perhaps their work was viewed more favorably because of their unrelated personal reputations. I would argue that there's a line that should but can't be drawn here between context and bias. I actively try to view all of those styles and pieces of art from a perspective informed by the context of their artist reputations, but not biased by them. I want to understand more about the artist's visions based on their reputations without seeing their art as extensions of those reputations, positive or negative. But I just watched Trap and failed to, even if that was subconscious and without my active intention or effort. It's not easy. Our brains do it whether we want them to or not. I can't watch Harry Potter movies anymore without thinking the entire time about how much of a disgusting transphobe piece of trash J.K. Rowling is. I can't perceive them without wondering how much of their content was informed by those views. They're tainted. I made a whole video about whether or not it's right to try to separate art from artist because of it. And on some level, it makes sense. It's personal. We're predisposed to viewing things emotionally and having our perspectives clouded by that. It's human nature to find an artist's personal reputation morally repugnant and be repulsed by it, maybe to the point that it is more important than their art itself. But what about their artistic reputation? That brings us full circle. I didn't watch Trap because of M. Night Shyamalan's personal reputation. I know nothing about him as an individual. I watched it because of his artistic reputation alone. I knew his past work to be exceptional, and therefore watched it with an expectation for all of his future work to continue to be exceptional, which, as an artist, is admittedly dumb as hell because that's not how art works. Out of 20 paintings you make, maybe 5 will be exceptional, the best you can make. The rest will be experimental learning experiences that don't turn out the best, but teach you how to improve upon them. They're stepping stones. They're not regression. They're just stumbling while you move forwards. That's present in all forms of art. But as viewers, we don't have the context. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes, or if the artist is experimenting with something new that they don't necessarily feel confident with yet. We, most familiar with their prior work before that experimentation, might view it more critically because it doesn't meet the standards that we might expect from someone with that reputation, therefore eliminating our ability to view their work objectively. We might have otherwise viewed that work favorably without that expectation. That then begs the question of which one is more influential, the artistic reputation of an artist or the personal reputation. Let's use J.K. Rowling as an example because she is, in my personal and correct opinion, garbage. If she had been known for an artistic reputation of creating hard-hitting, thought-provoking, immersive, influential movies that employed such refined world-building and character development that they put you as a viewer right into them, and then made like a cheesy, half-assed rom-com full of shitty, overdone tropes that was clearly a cash grab sellout, would that make you hate it more? More than, say, a movie that was just as good as all of the prior iterations, but came on the heels of her saying that an entire demographic of humanity doesn't have the right to live, destroying her personal reputation? I honestly don't know. I feel like the power of morality and maybe humanity makes the latter more powerful. I think personal reputation might have more power over one's ability to appreciate the artist's work than the artistic. I feel like if I knew M. Night Shyamalan had done something reprehensible before watching Trap, I either wouldn't have watched it at all or might have been overly critical of it. However, if I also erased his artistic reputation as a prominent director known for making iconic movies superior to most others in their category, I might also not have watched it in the first place. Either way, it's subjective. If artistic or personal reputation is more influential than the other, that conclusion ultimately comes down to a matter of personal opinion and individual priorities. One way or another, though, the wider-reaching conclusion remains clear, at least to me. An artist's reputation is, from almost every angle, more influential and important than their art itself. It does depend on setting. If you see art in a gallery without any knowledge of the artist, reputation is irrelevant. But even if you're vaguely aware of their reputation, positive or negative, it's impossible to disregard it. You're forced to view their work through the lens of who they are and what they've done. As I said in the beginning, fundamentally, the value of art is, in my opinion, what it expresses and how it does so. But functionally and practically, we can't appreciate either if our perspective is clouded by what we think of the artist who made it. That's just my take on it though, and I'm curious to know what you guys think too, so please do let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Special thank you as always to channel members Joseph Solomon, TC Pratt, Haruki Saluzzo, Extinction Animation, Andy the Hedgehog, Kai the Memer, Jazz, Just Sayori, Hailstorm, Darkholder, Another Foxboy, Pale Star, and Cyber Tori, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Kim Yen, Crazy Azar, Gentong, MG, Blah Mage, TC Pratt, Celine Moongazer, Eldritchia, The Stray Dog, Decagon, Jenny Chan, Catbus, Lucy Yamajiki, Selena Beebe, Pride, Peel, Wingtang Wong, Marie Greer, Potato, Jazz, Voidwalker, Latte Tabby, Christian Cook, Adam Sorovic, Doriaki, Barius, Hailstorm, Emo Queen Jules, Show That's It, Craig, Scarlet Flame 234, The Names Are Gone, Luwuka Owo, and Art of Amethyst Fable. And I'll see you in the next one.